this is what Google Keep looks like when you sign in for the first time. Okay, with the exception of the labels on the left side, okay, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But I just want you to understand that if when you sign in and you see this screen, then that means you are on the right track. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to take a general note inside of Google Keep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on where it says take a note right here at the top. And the first thing I always do is I just give my note a title. So I'm going to do Round Rock ISD Summer PD. Okay, so it gives my note a title. And in the body of the note, I'm just going to type, thank you for watching, my video. Okay, and then I'm going to click done. Okay, so you'll notice that what Google Keep, what I always tell conference attendees or session attendees is that think of Google Keep as like a whole bunch of sticky notes put like either on a cork board or whiteboard or whatever you want to call it. So a lot of times people don't really understand that right away, but once I start to build more notes, then you're going to kind of see how this all kind of fits together. So I'm going to go out of order just a little bit because I want to make sure that you understand all the different types of notes that you can make inside of Google Keep. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to go to drawing. So if you see where my mouse is and I'm hovering over this little marker, it says new note with drawing. So I'm going to click on that. Okay, so what happens now is you're able to take a note basically free-handedly. Okay, so what I mean by that is now you can draw inside of here. So we'll talk about these buttons up here. So this is the quick selection tool. If you have a bunch of drawings on a note and you want to select just a certain portion of it and edit that, you can do that. Okay, here's the eraser. And then here are 3 different types of pens. Usually when I demo this, I just stick to this very first pen just because I like something that's a little bit more fine. But you're more than welcome to use any of these types. So this one is more like a marker, and this is more like a highlighter. Okay, so again, I'm going to use this first pen. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to click this drop down arrow. And so when I click the drop down arrow, some options happen. So you can change the color of the pen if you prefer that, and you can also change the size. There's another drop down arrow right here, and when I click that, there's even more colors to choose from. Okay, so today I think I'm gonna go ahead and use this blue right here, and then I'm going to increase the size of this pen just a little bit, just so that way you all can kind of see what I'm drawing here. I'm going to click on this size. Okay, and you'll notice as I bring the mouse away from that drop down menu, you'll see the color of the marker. So I'm just going to change it real quick just so that way you guys see the difference, to see how I click purple and it changed to purple, and now I'm going to go back to blue. Okay, so I'm going to click here in this white area just to get rid of that window. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw, for all the math teachers out there in the world, I'm just going to draw a really quick math problem. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 plus x equals 9. Okay, and then I'm going to solve for x, right? So we know that x equals 5. And that's it, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to click this back arrow, and what it'll do is now it'll show the note as a drawing. So I can still give this note a title. So we're going to say math problem, and we'll do yay, I got the problem correct. Okay, and then I'm just going to click done. So again, you have a drawing, and then you have just a simple note. So again, you'll notice that both of them have a title, and you can also you can also type in the body of the note as well. Okay, so now for my favorite one. This is how I actually learned about Google Keep. I had a colleague tell me one day, she's like, have you ever heard of Google Keep? And I'm like, no, what's that? Like, tell me a little bit about it. And the first thing she says was, well, this is how my husband and I grocery shop. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do y'all do that? So I'm gonna show you, right? So your third option with Google Keep is you can create a list. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on the icon that says new list. Okay, of course I'm gonna give it a title first. Okay, so we're gonna kind of demo it as a grocery list. So I'm gonna do grocery list. Okay, and then what I'm gonna start doing is I'm just gonna start listing or typing out just typical grocery items that you might have to pick up on a weekly basis, for example. Okay, so I'm gonna do eggs, and all I'm doing to get to the next list item is I'm just hitting enter on my keyboard. So I typed in eggs, I'm gonna hit enter, and then I'm gonna do milk, do bread, I like apples, and then I'll do bananas. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave my cursor there because I want you to see something in a second. One of the cool, unique ways about making a list is that you can do so many things with this, and again I'm going to demo that in a second. But the reason why I wanted to make sure that my cursor stayed there is because what the wonderful people at Google do is they write these amazing algorithms that help the end user, right? So people like you and I. So you'll notice is I typed the word bananas. Okay, well, first of all, Google Keep recognizes that I am building a grocery list. Isn't that pretty cool? So you'll see on the left hand side that little grocery cart icon. So when I saw that for the first time, I thought that was really neat. Well, based on me typing the word bananas, now Google Keep has suggested other items that I may or may not have thought about. So maybe, right, I have bananas there, but maybe I wanted to make another type of ingredient, such as bananas bread, right? Or bananas, and I need maybe organic bananas, okay? So it suggests based on what type of grocery list item that you put in there, okay? So I think that's really neat. I'm just gonna leave that for now, and I'm gonna click done. So again, here are your three different types of notes. So you have a list, you have a drawing, and you just have a very simple note. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the list for a second. And let's say I am at the grocery store and I've put my grocery list in the Google Keep. And I'm going through the aisles and I'm putting these items in my cart. You really want a list to act just like a list, right? So when you place these items in your basket, you want to know, hey, I already got these items. Okay, so all you have to do is just click on the checkbox next to the item. And you'll notice that when you do that, it actually crosses out the word for you. So way back when, before you watch this video, right, and you would take lists like on a notepad or something like that, and then you would cross that list out or cross that item out, and it felt really good, right? You felt like you were really accomplishing something. Well, Google Keep is also visual like that as well. I think that's one of the really cool features about the list view. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back. So right now I'm clicking back into the note to go back into edit mode. Okay, so I'm gonna click that. And when I click on the note itself, what you'll notice is that anytime I checked an item, it brought it to the bottom of my list. Okay, again, I'm in edit mode, right? But here's the unique thing about creating a list inside of Google Keep is rather than always having to have multiple grocery lists, okay, inside of your Google Keep platform, what you can do is you can just use one list all the time. So let's say you're constantly buying eggs, milk, and apples, bread and bananas every single time you go to the grocery store, right? Well, what you could do is you can uncheck the box next to the item that has already been checked off, and what it'll do is it'll bring those items back into your original list. So like I said, instead of having grocery lists for week 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the month, you can just continuously use the same list every single time. So I think that's a very cool approach to the way the list, I guess, acts in this case, okay? All right, so let's talk about what's going on down here at the bottom of this particular note. Okay, we're gonna get into reminders and sharing in another video that I'm gonna create for you, so we won't talk about that just yet. But what I do wanna talk about is kind of making your Google Keep notes a little bit more personal. So what I can do is I can actually change the color of a note. Okay, if you're anything like me, a very visual person, maybe you might need different colors for different types of notes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change this guy to blue. Okay, so you'll notice the whole thing changes, right? If you wanted to, you can add an image to this list right now. If you click on add image, you can grab something that maybe you already have on your laptop, but we'll talk about adding images from a mobile perspective in the next video. Okay, you can also archive Google Keep notes. The way I explain this is archiving a Google Keep note is kind of like the same way you would archive an email account, or an inbox or an email message in your Gmail account. So you're not totally getting rid of it. In other words, you don't want to trash it, but at the same time, you don't want it to show up on your Google Keep list either. Okay, so it's just it's another alternative or a great way to kind of organize yourself with this. So the magical 3 buttons. Anytime I do this session at a conference, I always tell people, if you're inside of a Google product and you see those 3 little dots or 3 little buttons, whatever you want to call them, click on them, because it's probably something that you're probably going to want to take a look at, or an added feature. Okay, so you'll notice when I clicked on those 3 dots, you can delete a note, you can add a label, you can add a drawing to it, you can make a copy, you can hide those checkboxes if you don't want it to act like a list anymore. Or what you can do, and this is really valuable, we're going to talk about this a little later, is copying to Google Docs. Okay, that's going to be extremely powerful when you see our last task that we're going to do. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm going to get slightly out of order, okay? I'm going to show you a couple of things about what a list can really do for you, okay? I talk about this a lot, that a list can actually act as a roadmap for you. So you'll notice that when I hover my mouse to the left side of those boxes, you see these 6 little dots. Okay, what this allows me to do is allows me to rearrange the order of my list. Okay, so let's say that you go to a particular grocery store and you know it really well, but you know that the eggs and the milk, especially if you're going in order of your list, aren't next to each other. So let's say, for example, eggs is on one side of the store, milk is on the other, and then bread is like in the middle, and then apples are at the front of the store. You know, you're going to be bouncing all around the store, and it's just not going to make for a great experience. What you can do is you can slide these items in the correct order of the path that you are going to take at the grocery store. Okay, so as you're going and you're reading this list from the top to the bottom, you're actually going in a map, okay, so to speak, right? So you're making sure that you're going in order as the items are set out or laid out in the grocery store. So I think it's just a great way, or another added advantage of being able to rearrange those lists. Okay, out here to the right hand side, I don't know if you guys are watching this as I'm moving my cursor around, but you see how you have this delete button. So if you needed to get rid of an item, instead of checking it off, because remember, if you check it off, it's still going to stay on the list. But if you want to completely delete it, then you just click that X and it'll get rid of that item for you. All right, the last thing that I'm going to talk about here is pinning. Okay, so up here in the upper right hand corner, you see this little, it looks like a little thumbtack, but it says pin note. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that. Okay, it changes from black to blue. Okay, so you'll know that it's pinned. But watch this. When I click done, what it's going to do is it's going to pin that particular note at the very top of my Google Keep list. What's the big deal with that, right? Well, when I use this, especially for my job and at my campus, maybe there's really important things that I need to see at the very top of my Google Keep list. So what I'll do is I will pin those important notes at the very top. So that way, every single time, whether I'm on a mobile device or whether I'm on my laptop, I see those notes first. And maybe those notes really need to be looked at maybe on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly basis. So again, now you know how to create 3 different types of notes, your list, your drawings, and then your general note. So maybe some of those items need to be at the very top of your list. So when I pin it, it goes to the very top, and you'll notice that the other 2 notes that we took are now shifted down. I'm gonna go over here to the left-hand side. We're going to talk about labels, right? So you'll notice I have 4 labels here, but I'm going to create a brand new one for you guys. Okay, so down here at the very bottom of this list, I'm going to click on create new label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this label a title. I'm going to do Round Rock ISD Summer PD. Okay, and then I'm gonna click done. So you'll notice that now Round Rock Summer PD has been added. I'm gonna go back to this note right here. And again, I'm just hovering, just using my mouse cursor. I'm gonna click on those three little buttons again, or three little dots, and I'm gonna click add label this time. So when I click add label, here is where I have an option of choosing, maybe I want this particular note to be under a certain topic, okay? And I'm gonna show you how you can just check this. And so I'm gonna click out here, and you'll notice now that it has that little tag where it says Round Rock ISD Summer PD. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because when I come back over here to my label and I click on Round Rock ISD Summer PD, it will only show me those Google Keep notes that have been labeled that particular title. So what I always tell people this is that sometimes your Google Keep notes can get really long. Okay, in other words, you can have a whole bunch of them. I'm not gonna demo how I normally do because just for the sake of time, but my work Google Keep notes, I have a lot of them. And so it's just a great way for me to kind of just stay organized. Let's talk about editing a label. So I'm gonna click on the word edit right here. So what you'll notice is on the right-hand side, you have these little, they look like little pencils. So you can actually click on that and you can rename a label if you need to. The other thing you can do is if you want to get rid of a label, you can also delete it. Okay, that's pretty valuable too. The other thing that I discovered the other day is if I want to stay in here and I want to make a whole list of labels. So let's say I want to label some Google Keep notes based on a class period or class periods. So if I do first period and then hit this little check, I could do second period, oops, and then hit check, and then do third period, and then check, and then so on and so forth. So you'll notice how it puts them in order based on that numeric value. So kind of neat, kind of a cool way to do it. Okay, so I'm gonna click done. Okay, last thing that we're gonna take a look at in this video are the settings. Okay, so I showed you just some general settings here on the notes themselves, but now we're going to talk about actual like Google Keep platform settings. So I'm going to click on the settings title there, and again it's that little gear icon that I'm sure you've seen in other Google products. These are just some general settings that are actually again built into Google Keep. So list behavior. So it says add new items to the bottom. So remember how when I checked off those grocery list items and it brought the items that were checked off to the bottom when I was in edit mode? You probably want to leave that just so that way, again, you can reuse that list over and over and over. When you're adding new items too, and you saw how I also hit enter on the keyboard, it just made those items just continually go down the list. So again, you want both those boxes probably on. For your custom reminder defaults, this is completely up to you. If you want to change these, you don't necessarily have to, but once you do change them, they actually stay defaulted in Google Keep. So maybe, and for the, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and change this so that way you guys can see. So maybe morning for me is not necessarily 6 a.m. Okay, maybe for me, let's do 6:30. It's usually when I wake up. And then afternoon, maybe afternoon for me is more like 12:30. I'm gonna change that to 12:30 p.m. Oops. p.m. And then maybe evening for me is, maybe I consider more like 5:30 evening. Okay, so you can do that there. Okay, enable sharing. You're gonna wanna make sure that you decide whether or not you're gonna want to have the ability to share notes. I am a big advocate for sharing just in general, and so if it's a great way for you to communicate with colleagues, maybe even students, okay, so I'm going to talk about the sharing option a little bit later, but I would maybe just leave that just in case maybe there's one day where you're like, oh, you know what, I took some great notes at a faculty meeting or something like that, and I want to share it with one of my colleagues. Well, you have that capability to do that, okay? And then display rich link previews. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I want you to make sure that you leave that on, so don't click that box. So we're going to click save.